Tier list Tim Tams, it is finally your time. I know you wait for this every single month, and every single month I'm here to deliver on the second last day of the month, the tier list for this month in Zero. So we saw the release of set 6, and there's honestly quite a lot of surprises with it too. I think there's a lot of decks that we expected to do pretty well, especially with like Time Leap and Chaos especially being involved. I think a lot of people expected those to be like the top decks based on how they were in the TCG, but in Zero it looks to be a completely different case in terms of what is actually topping, with Asha being the big boogeyman of this set in the end after all. So today we're going to do our usual stuff, take a look at game with, and then take a look at my own tier list after that. But of course, if you like these kind of videos, please do give it a like, because that is how I know that you guys like this kind of content, and it incentivizes me to make more of it in the future too, right? And of course, if you want to give some extra support to the channel, consider subscribing, or if you want to give some extra support to the channel, you can become a YouTube channel member or a Twitch subscriber, where of course you actually feed into improving my content in the future as well, in terms of new equipment and being able to actually afford to do things that I normally wouldn't be able to. And also, if you want to stay in touch, I got a Twitter, we got a Discord, there's plenty of things in the description down below that you can check out, so I do greatly appreciate it. But with that out of the way, let's take a look at first the Japanese tier list and then take a look at my own. Getting into it, you can see here we have a game with, as usual, with their breakdown. So just recently we had the finish of the Narukami Clan event that kind of introduced and supported 3 decks, I guess, basically with Vanquisher, with Eradicators, as well as the Tonics, which unfortunately is a little bit copium. But let's take a look at how they rate all the decks in the actual set. So tier 1 of the new set is Ultmal and Asha. I think I do agree, these do feel like the 2 best decks of the set in my opinion. I would put Asha a bit higher though, because it is very annoying to play against. That being said, Ultmal is definitely like the combo deck of the game right now. It is just so strong, being able to push out so many attacks, especially when your opponent's on like a high pressure turn. It's crazy. In tier 2 they put Diablos, and I don't rate Diablo as highly just because I haven't really seen much of it, but it does have a potential, but it feels like it's a bit too like piece reliant in a sense, with like pieces that you can't really search out. Then we have Time Leap here in tier 2 as well, which I do think it is a pretty good place to put it. I think Time Leap has potential if played right. Chaos Universe up here together with the Deleters, which I don't know if I'll put Deleter this high, and then we have the Legends. So the way it looks at the end is you can see like what moved up and down. Of course, Angels and Nemuel and Nairos are still up here as well. We see Messiah's kind of dropped off. Diablos, of course, are still up here as well. Thavas not as high once again. Lukier up here. Harry is also up here together with Overlord. And then in tier 3 we have the leaders, the Legend. I think the Legend could go a little bit higher personally. Rising Nova is up here after the clan event too. We haven't seen this yet. Blue Waves, Pure Gavriel. So this, of course, like even Pure Gavriel plays the Legions. I think it could go a little bit higher, to be honest. This is Chronojet before Time Leap, so we're not going to be talking about pre-Time Leap Chronojet. We're going to just talk about specifically Time Leap. And then Blade Master is way too low in my opinion. I would rate this way higher. Like, it's not bordering the Legion decks at all in my opinion. So yeah, and then tier 4 Detonics is the one that starts it out. So that's basically how the Japanese side ranks it, and let's take a look at my own. So I've decided to kind of fix it up a little bit. As you'll notice, a lot of decks were removed just because like I would just bloat this like underrepresented category. I have nothing good to say about them. Like, if you want to see my last opinions on some of the decks that exited from this tier list, you can check out the one from last month or the one from the month before that, and you'll have a nice kind of idea of what I think of the deck as well. But so let's just kind of go through it. Of course, some of the older decks I don't think I want to spend too much time on. You know, the Revengers are still going to be pretty good, not super amazing anymore, but still pretty decent. Nemuel, I think, is still up here. Let's try to filter out the stuff that isn't like recently updated, that I don't have as much to talk about. You know, Victor, I think, is viable. Thavas, technically our previous support, I think, is still up here as one of the best decks, but on the lower side. Bermudas, again, like all Bermuda variants are definitely part of the best decks tier. Susano, after the recent support, maybe at the bottom of viable, I would say, is like the most I would put it at. Claret as well, viable. Gurgwit, kind of struggling, definitely waiting for his new support in the next set. I think this will, like, seeing Glorious rating already definitely feels like this will push the deck quite a lot. I think it's just maybe like same as Susano, just kind of like not entirely a struggle, but definitely not in the best position yet. Messiahs, I think, are also definitely in a pretty good spot. They're pretty high up. Celestials, I think, are also very strong. I would put them somewhere around here as well, together with the Bermudas. Not sure if I would put them over the Bermudas. I think they're just about like in the similar kind of level, but honestly, these decks are kind of, well, at least these 2 decks are kind of problematic in terms of how they can stall games for sure. Then Sanctuary Guard is definitely viable. MLB is still viable. Brawlers, I think, are pretty competitive. Same for Heavy Duke. Lukia, I think, is definitely up here as well. Like, Silverthorns are a very good deck right now. Bugs are definitely viable, if not even highly competitive. But now there's so much resist that Bugs are kind of falling off. Like, Bugs are actually getting affected by the current meta in that, like, everything, just so many things have resist, and one of the resist decks is super popular, so of course that's going to make it fall off. So it does drop off a little bit in my opinion. It's not as high. Leopold, I think, is still perfectly viable. D-Robos are somewhere around here, maybe like bottom side of viable, I would say. That's a little bit of my bias speaking though, for sure. Night Rose, I would still say, is one of the best decks as well. Just trying to filter out here the things that we've already spoken about. Yasuya is definitely decent as well, kind of goes to the bottom side as well. I've said as well so many times in this video, and it's only been like 5 minutes. Fenrir is 100% decent, definitely decent. I think it has even higher potential to go up in here, like at some point maybe, but not for the time being. Nubatama is also viable. Like, honestly, just I've basically kept the decks that I think are at least deserving of being viable here. So I think that's kind of it. That's like the decks that really haven't been affected at all by the recent support. I guess Gavriel is here too. I would put her in highly competitive, somewhere around here. I think the Celestial build is better, but I think Gavriel herself is still very, very good with the Celestial Legion package, so I would still put it up here for sure. So I think that leaves us with just mostly new stuff and things that got upgraded or received, like, didn't necessarily receive support, but the clan got support, and as a result the deck kind of got affected too. So starting off with Chronojet, this is Time Leap. So Time Leap, in my opinion, is kind of close to where Messiahs are, because this deck is... At first, you kind of want to just go into like Metallica Phoenix first try, do Mela Murwatar combos, but it doesn't work like that in Zero, right? The damage scaling is too high for this deck to do any combos in the mid game. You have to use the Fate Rider first stride in order to push your opponent to 5 or to 4 at the very least, so that your Time Leap combos actually have pressure, because then you can second stride Metallica Phoenix and you basically have like attack, History Maker, make another attack, so that's already 2, you go into a third one, and then you mel him into an Urwatar, and then you go attack with Metallica Phoenix. For the 4th attack, he leaps the Urwatar into a Melem, and then you get a 5th attack off of that too. So you get a bunch of attacks, and at the same time you're drawing a bunch of cards off of the Urwatar looping. So doing 5 attacks when your opponent's on 5 damage is pretty good when you are spinning their front row as well, so that they have less intercepts. And you also play Glimmer Breath in this, so you actually try to get rid of all of their front row, so that you can actually like land all those 5 attacks to their face when they're on 5. So I think the deck has a lot of potential, but it needs a good push early on. So I think this, at least for my testing, it's honestly felt pretty good. I think the deck has honestly been pretty damn good, and so I would rate it like fairly high, but not too high. I think somewhere around here, like these decks, closer like on this kind of line in my opinion. Then Altmile after the recent support, as I said before, this deck is amazing. I will put them together with Night Rose. I think it's like kind of around here, like Night Rose and Altmile are very similar in what they do. Every CB equals more attacks. Like, that's just it. Every Counterblast equals another attack that you have to deal with, whether it's off the Bone or off the Night Rose stride in Night Rose, or whether it's off of a Benzel, you know, off of a Tengen Altmile, or a like Knight of Twin Sword in Altmile, right? So every CB equals more attacks, and therefore I think that this deck just excels in being able to push the opponent to like 4 or 5 on first stride, and then be able to just go crazy with combos on Tengen, because you essentially get so many attacks, right? You get rear, Tengen searches a Benzel. Benzel can search out a Knight of Twin Sword. Benzel swings. Knight of Twin Sword swings. Twin Sword searches out, like, I don't know, a Knight of Fragment, and then that still swings. Like, you get so many attacks in one turn. Same goes for Night Rose. Like, you can just basically go, like, swing, bone, pop the thing it attacked with, use lazy, call something else out. There's, like, another bone in the other column. You swing with that, just do the same thing again. Like, you can do so many attacks in these decks. And, of course, like, a lot of decks can't deal with that. A lot of decks can't deal with how oppressive like, not oppressive, but just how, like, high pressure these combos can be. And so I think because of that, like, these decks definitely deserve to sit at the top, and I would, you know, I'm pretty comfortable in keeping them up here as well. That's the thing with with Thavas as well, is that the deck is really strong, but Thavas needs all of its pieces in hand. Like, that's the one thing, is that going second Thavas is still insane, and like you draw so many cards, and like you plus a lot, and like, you know, the multi-attack is really strong, but it relies on drawing all of them, right? Same with Bermuda, to be honest. It also relies on drawing the combo pieces. These two decks don't actually care about that, and that's what sets them apart. Night Rose can mill her own pieces, her own combo pieces, and set up the combo like that. Altmile literally searches the deck for everything. All you need to draw into is your back row that supports your combo. So I think for that reason, like, these decks are the best combo decks, and like, you know, because they don't have to draw into them. They don't have to draw into the pieces. You can search them out, and that's what makes it really, really strong. Blade Master, I personally think, is in a pretty good spot as well. I would put it somewhere around here, because now you have Express for like an additional win con for this deck, you know, and especially when your opponent doesn't leave up any front row and you have nothing to retire, it's like, well, I might as well go for this cool guard district, especially if I got pushed to 5. So Blade Master I think is in a pretty good spot. Again, usually running the greats. They also run like a couple of the legends now as well, just to kind of like have that like going first ride up search is really good on the legend. But I think Blade Master deserves to like just sit up here with Chronojet, with Messiah. It's kind of like around here. I think maybe I could even knock down like Pale Moon a little bit. I think it's like it's very good, but it's also a very CB gated deck and a deck with not much countercharge outside of like, you know, countercharging PGs. So like once they kind of blow through their first aggression, they can definitely kind of just like run out of steam. With Blade Master and the Cross is kind of a similar case. Like this deck also, I honestly think the Cross is just not as great anymore. I think it's still very competitive. It's like about as competitive as Revengers, and like it will still be pretty strong. But the Cross having lost so many of its key components just kind of hurts. Like it kind of hurts. You don't have the counter charge, you don't have the, you know, you have to discard now off the cross search, so it's not as great. But people are splashing it with the legend, and because of that you technically have the just, you know, more options, more plays. Like the legend deck basically coming out and giving you options for the cross as a deck too is pretty good. So I think that it deserves to stand up here somewhere with the highly competitive decks, although to the lower end. All right, now of course, you know, we talked a lot about the combo decks, but on the opposite side of the combo decks there is something that almost feels like a control deck, which is Asha. And Asha somehow, I don't know yet if I would put her necessarily at the very top, but she's like somewhere around here. This is a deck that you simply do not want to face. Now, if you watched the Vanguard Zero Grand Finals 2021 VOD that I uploaded on YouTube the other, like literally today, I think, you will see that almost everyone banned out each other's Neo Nectar, because this deck is capable of setting up 21k intercepts on the opponent's turn, and the Vanguard is going to be pretty swole too, so the majority of decks just can't hit that kind of number. Like, you literally have to swing your stride into a rear guard to clear an intercept in order to make the power go down. The reason why is because thanks to the addition of Thuria is a resist grade 2 that recycles your units, and she also is able to copy the name of everything on the field. So because she copies the name of everything on the field, Jingle Flower is just an insane stride now, because it allows you to just set up for super tanky turns while pushing your own offensive thanks to Gladiolus, because you have huge numbers in your turn too. So you can easily just like commit your CB to Gladiolus to push your opponent while they can't push you, and then you're able to just finish it off with like a Dream Spinning Asha, or just doing Gladiolus again, or basically just going to Primavera for more multi-attacks, right? Asha is just a really powerful deck in being able to like pressure the opponent to like pass turn or put down everything they can and like commit so many resources that they would normally use to kill you, and instead they have to do it just to clear your intercepts, which is insane, right? So for that reason, I think Asha deserves to be up here. Like, I don't know if I would put her over Night Rose and Altmal. I think they're honestly pretty close, but I think it's a huge indicator that everyone banned this deck out and not these two, right? Because of how obnoxious it is to play against. But these three are definitely like very close together, and also so is Nemuel, to be honest. Like these decks up here are definitely close up. These ones are a little bit behind, but I think they still deserve to stand up here for like regardless. Vanguard with the new support has definitely been quite annoying. I think it's kind of around here as usual. Like, it's still a really good deck. A lot of the like, it didn't get a lot of good support in this clan event, I would say. Like, a lot of the support goes to Eradicators and Detonics instead. But the addition of the new Stride is pretty good, and also they got some good just like Thunderstrike cards that give a bunch of power. So I think the deck is kind of in the usual spot as before. You know, it still gets kind of folded by resists as usual, but I think it's still a strong deck nevertheless, and like an amazing clan event. Maybe somewhere around here, like close to Chronojet and Blade Master, I would say. Now Diablo's kind of weird. Nobody really plays it. It's really rare to see Diablo, so to me it's like by default just like underrepresented. But in theory, Diablo has gotten a lot better, because Diablo got a grade 2 that counts a grade 1 in deck, so therefore you can call it out of the Maka. And also you also have like Spectral Blast of Diablo that's a restander with a crit, which is also sounds like a lot of good pressure, right? But it just doesn't come up. It doesn't come up. But I think in theory I would put it around here. I think Diablo, I don't know if it's like that highly competitive. It's like it's either at the top of viable or bottom of highly competitive. I think it's just a deck that has not been seen much in ladder, has not been seen much in tournaments. And if it hasn't been seen much in tournaments, I think that's an indicator that the competitive community also doesn't really rate it that high either. But unfortunately, I just don't have much else to say about the deck. I haven't been able to play it myself yet because I've only pulled one of the Spectral Blasters, so I can't even like play with the new updates yet, so I have to kind of wait till I pull them. So we might come back to this next month and see if we can evaluate it. Like, there's been plenty of decks in these tier lists where like on the first release month, I didn't really know much about it because it didn't come up enough, or I didn't have enough to build it, and then later on it got better. Like Yasuya, for example, is definitely an indication of that, right? So this might go up, but for now I'm going to just place it here. Spikes in general, this is both Dudley's and Rising. I didn't want to set two different categories because I think that both the decks are actually very good. I think they're also pretty high and viable. Like, it's another amazing clan event. Like, wow, who would have thought? Like, they really do good with the clan events. Fenrir was amazing, Vanquisher was amazing, like this was amazing. Victor just needs more support and it'll get better too. But I think spikes are really good. Like, whether you focus on Dudley's, whether you focus on Rising, you have really good combos. You have so much ability to just like push your opponent really well and manipulate your resources well, and you're a deck that has access to Conroe in Mecha Trainer and being able to search out your PGs, being able to search out your Stride Fodders, etc., just like Conroe can, right? So I think spikes are definitely like somewhere up here. It's just a good deck overall, but I haven't really tested it myself yet to really tell you if it's like highly competitive or not, but I think it's like, it's fine to put at the top of viable here. But then we have the good old Tetra and Anger Boils. I think this deck is also kind of somewhere up here. Like, it's very good, I think, for the most part, but it feels like Stavas does what it does just better. So that's kind of like my problem with it, is that I think the deck is quite strong in just being able to push really well, and it has the extra cycle aspect to it as well, and you also have a pretty useful GB2 compared to Stavas's, which isn't as useful. And Foivos is an amazing read too. Like, Foivos is a really good rear guard that obviously carries the deck a lot, but I think the highest I would place it is like somewhere here towards the bottom of highly competitive, because like you could take it to a tournament, but I think it's kind of around here together with Diablo and Spikes. It's like a very good deck, but I wouldn't rate it as highly. If anything, I'm kind of like thinking to rebalance this a little bit, like maybe these are like slightly on the struggle side. Like, Susano's recent support was nice, but it doesn't feel like it really like is very groundbreaking. And then of course Gurgwet just needs any way to not deck out, which again Glorious Raining helps to not do, and also a way to, you know, just be able to have more punishing strides and more offensive strides, which again Glorious Raining helps you do. Then we have Harry. Harry I think is pretty damn good. We got to see it finally at the Zero Grand Finals. One of the players brought it, and I've also been facing it in ladder more often, and honestly, if you give them enough CB, like they basically can combo you as hard as Night Rose. But the problem is this deck decks out super hard because a lot of the Soul Blasts are compulsory. Not Soul Blasts, Soul Charges are compulsory, and you just don't have a way out of it. But the combos it can do is insane. The combos are insane. You have a lot of good toolboxing with the drop, with the Soul that you have here as well. So I think Harry actually has a lot of potential. Like, there's a reason why it was brought, and I think that, you know, being able to loop off of Betty just like over and over and over again and keep making attacks is really, really strong, and you can push strong attacks off of them too, thanks to the Juggler and things like that. So I think Harry has potential. I would put it somewhere around here, maybe even a little bit higher. Like, it's honestly a pretty good deck. I think Silverthorns are a little bit better, but Harry is a pretty good deck, honestly. The Legend, like pure the Legend, I think is fine. I don't think it's as good as Blade Master, because Blade Master just has that like inherent like pop at all times. I think it's like better than the Cross. I think it's around like Blaural, yes, Brawler level, because you have this ability to kind of like have that GB2 that you don't really use as much. You kind of mostly use him for the actual, like, you know, being able to just like search a PG or search your Flame Dragons and stuff, and then have access to just you know, the amazing rest of the package that Kagero comes with, you know, the amazing G-Zone, Conroe, like a lot of the good main deck cards as well. So I think the Legend is pretty good for that reason alone. So I would put it up here. Like, it's another Kagero deck that ranks pretty highly, but I think Blade Master still takes the cake from the Kagero decks. Deleters are viable. Like, Deleters are viable. They're not insane. They're pretty annoying to play against, and you can hit the win con on the Igor pretty I wouldn't say pretty consistently, but some decks are slower and therefore you will hit it against them, because what can they do, right? But again, it's the kind of deck that just can be played around, and at the same time you can break really easily, and it just kind of like fails to start up whatsoever if you ride the wrong grade 3. So that's kind of like the problem with the deck, I think, but otherwise it is pretty strong, pretty annoying. All right, and then wrapping up, we have Eradicators and Chaos. So Eradicators, the stride is pretty good, and they have access to a lot of the good stuff that Narukami has. So I haven't tested it myself yet, so I normally would put it here, but in theory I think it's around here. Like, it's got removal, it's got pressure, it's got crit pressure and stuff, and like self-damagers that pop your opponent's units and whatnot. So I feel like it has some potential. I think it has some potential, but we're gonna see if that's actually the case in the coming month or so. And then finally, Chaos. This was the big boogeyman that a lot of people thought would like take over the meta and be the best deck of all time, but I don't think it's as insane as people expected it to be, but I also don't think it's as bad as people bash it to be. I think it is somewhere around brawler level where a lot of decks will randomly fold to it because they just don't know how to play around it, and some Chaos players will just deck themselves out because they overuse their Zinks and they don't run Legions and stuff like that. But Chaos is still Chaos. Like, you have the ability to stun your opponent and just make them not play the game whatsoever. You have to work for it a little bit harder than some other decks, but I think Chaos still deserves to stand pretty high on this tier list because it's just a good deck, right? Chaos Universe is still a good stride. You have access to Big Crunch. Chaos Breakers on Break 4 is buffed as well. Like, just in general, there's a lot of good effects that, you know, like Palladium and Colony Maker and Iron especially, like, just so many good cards in this deck that honestly carry it pretty hard. So I think Chaos deserves to stand pretty high, maybe a bit higher than the Legend in my opinion. But we'll see how things pace out in the forthcoming future, because of course, you know, what is a lock against a deck that can just plop down your resists non-stop and recycle them every turn and bring them back out every turn, and they're resisting for 20k power as well. So yeah, Asha is going to be pretty nasty. It's going to be pretty nasty for a while. All right, so I think that's it. That's the tier list for this set. Again, this is going to be resolved. Like, Gurkut's literally getting amazing support next set, so it's going to finally get better. Susano, on the other hand, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe it's a little bit higher. We're going to see. I think it's also just an issue that not many people play this deck either. And, you know, a deck that is just draw power is a little bit sad when this deck draws way more and does a lot of other things in addition, right? So let me know what you guys think. If you disagree or agree, let me know in the comments. As always, this is my perception of the meta from looking at tournaments, playing ladder, and just talking to people as well. So you can disagree, you can reorder it entirely as you wish. You know, as always, this is just my impression of the meta and what I see common on the ladder, right? Don't forget that these tier lists are meant to be mostly representations of what you will see frequently and not necessarily what is the best. And these decks in particular are very popular on ladder right now, like these three in particular. All right, so with that, that's gonna be it for me today. Once again, if you liked the video, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. But otherwise, that's gonna be it for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.